Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see what if Deku became the legendary Golden Knight GARO. Here is short summary. Where there is light, shadows lurk and fear reigns. Yet by the blade of knights, mankind was given hope. When a human heart embraces evil, horrors feast, possessing those who invite them. Such vile, poisonous creatures have been hunted since time out of mind, relentlessly pursued by the men of the armor, the Makai Knights. And now, Izuku Midoriya has taken up this duty as he has claimed his birthright, the title of the Golden Knight, GARO. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. A clear, quiet evening for the city of Musudafu. It's the witching hour. A sprawling municipal center, a time for fear. Home to many that live day to day in peaceful bliss. Of all things that dwell in the shadows. For this city is home to many heroes. Hungering for the living. Atop one of the many high rises, a lone figure squatted on the roof's edge like a gargoyle. The most distinguishing feature, and only noticeable in the darkness, was that he was clad in a white and black duster. A hood covered his head, thus obscuring his face. The figure then stood up and leapt off the roof into the horizon. Kamui Woods and Death Arms found themselves in quite the bind. Before them was a low-level villain with a blade finger quirk who had just pinned a rather attractive young woman to the wall of an alley. The villain ran one of his blades lightly across the crying woman's face as he smirked. "Yet as you lay in bed, try anything and I'll slice this pretty little thing into sashimi," the villain said sadistically. Watching the shadows for something to move, ponder this. Death Arms growled in frustration. "Don't think for instant that you'll escape justice, villain," Kamui Woods exclaimed. "What do you think the darkness fears? I'm only gonna say this once," a new voice came. All eyes turned to the source. A young boy, if the tone of voice was any indication, in a hooded white and black duster, cargo pants and boots, standing behind the two heroes at the alleyway entrance. Asterisk. Step away from the humans. What the hell is this kid thinking? Death Arms wondered in confusion and concern. The last thing they need is some rookie or vigilante making things worse. The villain present, however, had something to say about the boy's warning. "Tough guy, huh, and if I don't?" In response, the unknown youth slowly raised his right arm, his hand clenched in a fist. Death Arms grew worried that this kid was gonna do something reckless that would put the girl in danger. "I wasn't talking to you," he said. The boy opened his middle, ring and pinky fingers, allowing a small bell to drop. The drop made the bell let out a ring that no one could hear, no one save for the girl. Her eyes glowed a bright purple. She started to spasm as they rolled into the back of her head, catching the attention of the villain and heroes present. She turned her head around and around until, with a sickening crack, the head performed a perfect 360, her mouth now formed into a nightmare-inducing Glasgow smile with needle-like teeth. The villain backed away in shock until he was within arm's length of the heroes, yet the two didn't act, too engrossed at the sudden turn of events. The woman's arm suddenly elongated, with her fingers becoming wicked and dirty-looking claws. She tried to swipe at the closest body, the villain, but was forced away by the boy delivering a powerful kick to the face. "You might wanna run," the boy said. The claw villain needed no further encouragement as he ran to the alley's entrance before being dog-piled by Death Arms and Kamui Woods. "You ruined my meal, boy." She swung at the hooded boy only for him to pull a sword from his coat to deflect the attack. Her other arm shifted to match the transformed one and tried again, but met with same result. The two heroes saw this as a signal to back away with the captured villain. Though they knew they should be rescuing the boy from this monster, it was evident that he knew what he was doing, not to mention that he was aware that the woman they had tried to save earlier was anything but and had the means to expose her. And on the subject of the woman, they had never seen a quirk like this, that is, if it even was a quirk. The boy blocked another strike as he slid backwards from the force. "Since I lost those three, you will have to do to sat my hunger." "I don't think so," the boy said before holding his sword over his head, then drew a circle of light. When he brought it down, something came down and formed on the boy. He was now clad in a black bodysuit with ornate gold armor and a helmet in the likeness of a snarling wolf with long ears, fangs and green gem on the forehead. A gold chest plate armor surrounded his upper body and he had some gold shoulder guards and a green gem was on the center. All over his arms were gold armor with guards on top the bracers on the forearms. A skull-themed emblem was on the left fist. On his legs were gold leg armor and gold armored boots and around his waist was a gold belt with a red triangle with gold outlines. Attached to the back was 2 cables with sickle-like blades on the ends. All across the gold armor was darkened lines akin to a circuit board while silver metallic cables ran in between the gold armor pieces. In his right hand was a golden broadsword with a red triangle. His eyes were a bright green that bore into the horror's core. "The Golden Knight GARO, she!" exclaimed in shock. The woman's body then began to inflate before it burst, revealing a creature that looked like the unholy spawn of a Venus flytrap and a man. "The horror Asmodee, it likes to play the damsel in distress to lure in prey," a voice from the Golden Knight's left hand said. The now named Asmodee let out a roar as it charged the armored youth. GARO responded in kind, charging while scraping the tip of his sword along the ground. Asmodee then leapt to the side wall before pushing off in a dive to its golden foe. GARO raised his sword to guard against the incoming slash before deflecting it away as his enemy touched the ground. Undeterred, the monster lashed out with a whip-like blade but the young knight somersaulted over it. Faster than the monster could think of a counter, GARO landed on his feet and sliced the weapon arm off before grabbing it by the face and hurling it at a dumpster. Asmodee shook off the dizziness and leapt again, this time at the Golden Knight, knocking him on his back. GARO was having none of it as he delivered a series of kicks to the beast's abdomen with the last one throwing it off. Asmodee was sent flying but grabbed the edge of the roof to stop itself. During this, GARO got on his feet and pulled an ornate lighter, of all things, out of nowhere. With a quick flick, he lit it, producing a green flame and ran it across his sword, setting the blade on fire just as the darkened circuit lines began to glow a neon green. Asmodee then threw itself at its armored foe while GARO ran at the wall before springboarding off it at the monster. It all happened so fast. One moment the two were mere inches away from a final clash. The next, the monster was now being burned alive by the green fire from GARO's sword. And through it all, the two pro-heroes watched in morbid fascination. The monster collapsed between the armored boy and the spectators as its body began to disintegrate from the flames, even ashes burned up. GARO, the lines no longer glowing, gave the two heroes a side glance before he walked off. The two heroes weren't sure if they should try and stop him but they wouldn't get the chance for when a flicker of the green fire obscured the Golden Knight for but a moment, he disappeared. Just as the last of the flames died out, the two heroes regained their wits as the events replayed in their minds. Death Arms was the first to get his voice back. "What the hell was all that?" "I don't know, it was like something out of a horror movie," Kamui answered. "And that woman, what kind of a quirk was that?" "Honestly, I don't think it was quirk, I don't think she was even human." Death Arms rubbed the bridge of his nose as he sighed. "Just when you thought you'd seen it all. I think I need a drink." "As much as I agree, we're gonna need to be sober. We got that new girl, Takayama, starting tomorrow. How do we file the report on this one?" Death Arms asked with a groan as he grabbed the detained villain. After dismissing his armor, the youth had ran across the rooftops to put distance between him and the heroes. Last thing he needed was to be interrogated about they just witnessed. Once he was sure he was far enough away, the mystery boy pulled back the hood, revealing curly black-green hair sitting atop a young freckled face, soft emerald green eyes that belie the iron-firm drive and focus within. This was the true face of GARO, Izuku Midoriya. "I learned 2 things when I was 4 years old. The first, all men are not created equal, some are born with more power than others." "Sorry kid, it's not gonna happen," the doctor said bluntly. A younger Izuku stared blankly at the doctor, as if he was just told him he was going to die. Oh dear, is something wrong with him after all? Most of the other kindergarteners have already started to show signs, the boy's mother, one Izuku Midoriya asked. My records show you're a 4th-generation quirk user. What powers do you and the boy's father have? Nothing too special. I can pull small things toward me and my husband breathes fire. They're useful enough, I suppose. It all began when a newborn child in China began to glow radiantly with no explanation. Not long after, people began to develop abilities straight out of comic books all over the world. These quirks sparked a change in society. What was once impossible was now the norm. Everyone had a superpower to call their own, and as a result, there were those who exploited them for selfish gains and those who utilized them as a force for justice and peace. Or rather, almost everyone. Izuku should have already manifested one or a combination of these by now, but after reviewing his X-ray, I don't think that's gonna happen. Roughly 80% of the population has a quirk, and those without one tend to be looked down upon. I should know, because I'm one of those without a quirk. Why? Because I had 2 joints in my pinky toe whereas everyone else had 1. My dream was to be a hero just like my idol, All Might, the greatest pro hero in the world. But the day I learned that I wouldn't ever develop a quirk, I felt like my heart had been torn in two. After the doctor's visit, the two returned home. Izuku practically secluded himself into his room, watching his favorite video. See that, Mom? He's always smiling, even when things look bad. Even when things seem impossible, he never gives up. The boy turned to his mother, and the sight that greeted her ripped her soul to shreds. Do you think I could be a hero like him? He asked as tears threatened to flood out. An Azure Dragon of the East production. The next day, when everyone at school found out about me being quirkless, I was ostracized and ridiculed, first by the kids, then their parents. Some of it even was directed at my parents. Hisashi Midoriya had just walked in as his wife greeted him. She relayed everything that had happened. She was in tears at how quickly the neighbors had turned on them, calling their boy a failure for life. Hisashi, what do we do? She asked. And when I was at my lowest, my father stepped forward. I may know a way. Inko returned her attention to her husband. I may know a way for our son to be a hero like he dreamed. But, he held up his left hand, gazing at the skull-like ring on his finger. In an instant, she realized what Hisashi was talking about. It means that I have to break a promise to you. Izuku laid on his bed, his tears dried up after another day of harassment at school. He heard his door open. He didn't move to see who. He felt someone sit on his bed. He didn't turn to greet them. Son, do you want to be a hero that much? Izuku didn't even flinch. Was his father gonna shred what was left of his heart, too? Do you want to be one, even if it means that no one knows? That no one is allowed to know. That got a reaction. Dad, what are you saying? He asked as Hisashi looked at his progeny with sad yet hardened eyes. I know a way to be a different kind of hero. However, you will remain hidden, a shadow in the blackest night. You will be a ghost to those you help. Any and all trace of your deeds will be erased from the public's eye. And above all, you will face nightmares made flesh, things so terrifying that even All Might himself would tremble. Izuku stared in disbelief and confusion. So I ask again, do you want to be a hero that much? Based on characters created by Keita Amamiya and Kohei Horikoshi. It was there that the second thing I learned was that the world has more troubles than people realize. There is a darker world, hidden in the background, where monsters dwell and feast on humans. These monsters are called horrors. When a human heart embraces evil, horrors pass into our world, possessing those who invite them and killing them in the process, wearing their skin like a suit. Such vile, poisonous creatures have been hunted since time out of mind by a secret group, the Makai Order, and their main fighting force, the Makai Knights. And the strongest knight in their ranks is the Golden Knight, GARO, that's me. The next morning found Izuku in dark room, now wearing a school uniform. He drew his sword and stabbed it into the mouth of a wolf statue. A second or two passed before Izuku removed the blade and sheathed it. From the bottom of the statue, a small black dagger materialized before a young girl in a French-made outfit stepped forward and placed it in a wooden box. The two then turned to the third person in the room. She was white-haired buxom beauty in a Lolita costume that could nearly any man quiver in lust. This was the watchdog of the district, Fenris. That's another one. How many does that make now? She asked. 9. This week, Izuku said between a yawn. The horrors have been rather active lately. Izuku raised his left hand, showing the skull ring on his middle finger. This was the Madogu, Zaruba. And the local heroes don't make things any easier. A shame quirks can't help in this. When quirks first emerged, the Order quickly researched their effectiveness on horrors. However, they soon learned that horrors were immune to most quirks outside of basic body enhancement types and some elementals. Soul Metal was also found to be resistant to many quirks, making combinations somewhat difficult without trial and error. Since Zaruba brought it up, Izuku returned his attention to Fenris as she spoke. The Senate held an assembly yesterday about the spike in horrors. And, after a rather lengthy argument, one possible solution they presented was to reveal ourselves to and work with the local governments and the hero community. I think that's a bad idea, Izuku said with a scowl. You're not the only one, but every night, priest and watchdog are getting run ragged with so many horrors appearing. This will allow us to move more freely. In theory, that is. Or it could lead to a witch hunt. Regardless, no verdict has been reached yet. For now, maintain your cover as a student and get some rest. It's a wonder you haven't collapsed from exhaustion, even if you are the Golden Knight. I'll be lucky if I don't fall asleep in class. Izuku muttered sardonically as he turned and left. He stepped out into the street after the entrance to the watchdog's den closed, leaving nothing but an unassuming wall. Izuku gave another yawn as he walked to school. But rest does sound good. I haven't had a good night's sleep in. His thoughts were interrupted by a cry of "Canyon Cannon," followed by a loud crash. He turned to the source to find what he assumed to be a villain on the receiving end of a flying kick by a titan of a woman in spandex. The crowd nearby began snapping picture after picture, particularly at her backside. Piece of cake for the next hottest hero. Hi everyone, I'm MT. Lady, and you don't have to worry about this bum anymore. She emphasized the bum part via presenting her own in a provocative way, much to the crowd's enjoyment. Oh brother, Izuku glared, exasperated at that dumb pun. He paid it no further mind as he made his way to school. Now that you're in your third year of junior high, it's time to start thinking about your futures, the teacher declared. Izuku could tell where this was going and saw no point in listening in. His eyelids became heavier and heavier until they closed. I could pass out some career aptitude tests, the teacher snatched them up with a smirk, but why bother? He then threw them away behind him. I know you all wanna go into the hero track. The student went into an uproar, showing off their quirks. Izuku by this point had already fallen asleep, softly snoring, yet no one noticed. Yes, you all have some impressive quirks. But no power usage in school, the teacher lightly admonished. Hey teach, don't lump me in with this bunch of losers, one male student boasted. I'm the real deal, but these extra will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister. The student let out a condescending laugh. He had ash blonde hair that stood up in all directions and red eyes that stared down everyone in the room like they were beneath him. This was Katsuki Bakugo. In response to his rather haughty attitude, the other students raged at him, but he paid them no mind. Ah Bakugo, you've got some impressive test scores. Maybe you will get into UA. Hi. He's going for the national school. That place has 0.2% acceptance rate. It's impossible to get in. That's why it's the only school for me, Bakugo countered smugly as hopped onto the top of his desk. I aced all the mock tests. I'm the only one at this school who stands a chance of getting in. I'll end up more famous than All Might himself and be the richest hero that ever lived. Everyone across the world will know who I am, and it all starts with UA. Hi, Bakugo declared like he knew exactly how things would turn out. The teacher, however, noted something in his list. The only one who hasn't said anything is Midoriya. There was a moment of silence as all eyes turned to the still sleeping Izuku, his head propped up by his right hand, before the rest of the class burst out laughing, jolting the green-haired boy awake. The only one not laughing was Bakugo as he stared at his old childhood friend. Midoriya, what could he possibly do? You'll never get anywhere without a quirk. Who's doing what without a quirk? Izuku asked groggily. You'll never get anywhere in life without quirk, let alone be a hero, said one student with stone for hair. Izuku's mood turned sour. Why would I wanna be some clown in tights? If you all want to go around parading like idiots, fine, but leave me out of it. He then got up, grabbed his bag and walked to the door. I don't feel well, I'm going home. My father told me I could be a different kind of hero, following the path of a knight. Makai Knights are supposed to hunt horrors and protect humanity from them. However, we are not supposed to be saviors, we are not heroes. But in recent years, I found myself being okay with that because all the students sneered as the green-haired boy left. What's his problem? A girl asked. Acting all high and mighty like that quirkless loser. Let it go. That last comment came from Bakugo oddly enough. Everyone turned to the blonde in surprise as he sat back down. He wouldn't be a hero even if he did have a quirk. Why? Because none of us would be as good as you. Another student griped. Bakugo looked out the window, his thoughts seemed far away. No, it's because Izuku had just walked out of the gates, a scowl still on his face. Deku hates heroes. A rather short, lanky, one could call him scrawny, man in a hoodie walked through the door of the meeting place. Word had gotten out about some kind of job that was looking for any bodies they could get their hands on. The interior was set up like a bar, with chairs, sofas, and tables with a good 30 people already there. You here for that job offer, too? A rather bulky man asked Scrawny. Yeah, you know what it's about. No, no one here does, but someone must be planning something big. All I do know is they are offering a lot of cash. I haven't seen this many people since before I dropped out of school. Must be gathering whatever strong quirks they can find. What can you do? My quirk allows me to bend all light around me, I call it eclipse. Depending on the size of the area I wanna cover determines how dark I can make it. I can make this room pitch black or a city block as dark as sunset. What an interesting ability you have. Every single one of the crooks shot up in alarm, frantically looking around. Who said that? Mind if I take it for a spin? The scrawny man whipped around but found nothing but a mirror. Suddenly his reflection changed into some kind of black, skeletal demon before a black miasma shot out and entered his eyes and mouth. The other criminals stood back in fear as he screamed. When it had stopped, Scrawny appeared unharmed. The crooks slowly approached the guy, quirks at the ready. Scrawny turned around, eyes glowing a sinister red. So, hungry, Midoriya hates heroes? A heavily muscled boy asked. I thought he was the biggest fanboy in Japan, a girl with horns added. Bakugo eyed all the students before turning back to the teacher. Hey teach, you heard about the victory scandal, right? This brought a round of confusion among the classroom before the teacher answered. The victory scandal, what does, the teacher glanced at the door Izuku left through before turning back to the blonde. Was it someone? His father, Bakugo answered. Now it makes sense, the educator grimaced in understanding. More confusion but limited to the students this time. Do any of you remember the former pro hero, Victory? The educator asked his class. Victory. Wait, I think I remember him. He almost took the top spot from All Might. Oh yeah, but he kinda dropped off the radar all of a sudden. Yeah, and for good reason. Whatever the teacher was going to say next was abruptly stopped by the sound of several students and teachers shouting the hallway. One student opened the door to find a proverbial stampede heading out. What's going on? The student called to another passing by. Arisu Raida is doing a farewell concert today. He shouted as he held up a poster. Arisu Raida was a pop idol who began her career at the age of 10 and was an overnight success. Having sold millions of records and performed many concerts, she had built up quite a massive fan base among the populace in just a few years. Alas, fame is fleeting and her popularity was beginning to wane. But rather than cling to a sinking ship just to stay relevant like other celebrities, she decided to go out on a high note. She got a recommendation to go to UA High next year. After today, she's gonna be devoting all her time to becoming a hero. This'll be her last live concert. Class dismissed, the teacher declared. The students wasted no time leaving, joining the crowd in the hallway. Around the same time, Izuku had just entered a tunnel on his way home. His tired mind kept drifting back to what his classmates had said about him again. He had to put up with this kind of ridicule since he was discovered to be quirkless. Even those with the most asinine of quirks looked down on him under the pretense that they at least have a quirk. They would show off their powers to him, mocking him that he can't do anything remotely that they can. He did take some delight in the irony that they would be no better than he was in the face of horrors, though. Nevertheless, it had seemed their teasing only gotten worse with time. Even the cliques that would be at the bottom of the social ladder would bully him. The more the memories came back, the more his listless mind boiled in anger until he threw his right fist at the adjacent wall, creating a spider web of cracks within a shallow crater that stretched the height of the wall. Sometimes I wish they knew what the real dangers were in this world and just how useless their precious quirks are against it. Careful, Izuku, Zaruba warned his partner. I know, it's not our place to judge them. Doesn't mean I can't have an opinion. As long as you don't act on that opinion. Izuku only gave an incoherent grumble as he resumed his journey home. However, it's a well-known fact that sleep deprivation dulls the senses, hence why he didn't notice the mass of sludge emerging from the manhole cover behind him. Until it was too late. The sludge leapt at the boy, restraining him as it tried to force itself down his throat. Izuku tried to pry him off but couldn't get a decent grip due to the villain's liquid body, not to mention that said villain was restraining his other arm. He couldn't make out what the mass of goo was saying while suffocating him. He did catch things like using his body, not knowing he was in town, and getting out of the city. Izuku was beginning to feel weak, his heart thumping erratically in his ears. Suddenly, the manhole cover the villain emerged from came flying off. Have no fear, you are safe. The mass of sludge whipped around to find his pursuer had caught up to him. Because I am here. The last thing Izuku saw before he passed out was the silhouette of massive man followed by a loud cry of Texas SMAAAAAAASH. He was brought back to the realm of consciousness by someone lightly slapping his face. He opened his bloodshot, dark-ringed eyes to find none other than the #1 hero in the world, symbol of peace himself, All Might. You were out for a while, thought we lost you there, he said boisterously. Izuku then pushed himself into a sitting position as All Might continued. You seem all right. Sorry about that back there, I didn't mean for you to be caught up in my justicking. Usually, I pay more attention to keeping bystanders safe. But it turns out this city's sewer system is pretty difficult to navigate, he said with a hearty laugh. Izuku lightly scowled and began to pick up his things that had fallen out when that villain had attacked him. All Might then held up a large water bottle, only now it was filled with something else. It took the green-haired boy a moment to realize that it was actually the sludge villain from earlier. Anyway, thank you, you were a big help. I've captured the evil doer while you were out. The younger male didn't seem to pay attention as he kept putting things back into his bag. All Might handed him his last notebook, marking one spot inside with his finger. Izuku took it and opened to find All Might had autographed 2 whole pages. You signed my notebook, he asked as the pro hero gave a big thumbs up. I'll something for your troubles, young man. You can brag to all your friends about it. Izuku then ripped out the pages, crumpled it up and threw it into the nearest trash can. As for All Might, he just stood there in awkward bewilderment at the notion of someone callously rejecting his autograph. Well, that was unexpected, he muttered. Not that I don't appreciate the help, but I'm not interested in your autograph. I kinda get the impression that you are not particularly fond of me. Heroes in general, I see. All Might then placed the bottle in his pants side pocket as the boy got into a kneeling position, one hand on the knee. In any case, I've gotta get this guy to the police so they can take care of him. When Izuku pushed back to his feet, he then noticed something about his hand, something was missing. Wait, where is? His mind wondered as he looked around. He finally caught sight of what the issue was, his Madogu practically drowning in that sludge villain. Zaruba. All Might then took to the air in a mighty leap, however, something felt off. He looked down to find the kid had grabbed onto his leg. Hey, what do you think you're doing? That villain, he has something. Izuku screamed. Alright, Calm down and hold on. The hero then held Izuku's shirt collar to make sure he didn't fall while searching for a place to land. A small cough escaped his mouth, as did a drop of blood. Shit. He found a moderately sized apartment complex and aimed for there, landing with a loud thud. Izuku then dropped to the floor panting heavily. That was very reckless, All Might scolded. Now what was it you were say? He then seized up as smoke came billowing off him. No, no, no. Not now. The green-haired boy watched the mountain of muscle that is All Might almost literally deflate until he was nothing more than a skeleton of a man with unkempt blonde hair and a rather unapproachable frown. Well, that was unexpected, Izuku thought to himself. All Might? He asked. Yeah, it's me, he answered before almost vomiting blood. What the hell is this? You know how guys at the pool beep it in to try and look buff. I'm like that. I guess there's a story behind this. All Might sighed in resignation. Yeah, just promise me you won't tell anyone or spread it online. The blonde hero then pulled up one side of his shirt, revealing a jagged-looking scar. Nasty, right? I got this 5 years ago taking down a villain. My respiratory system was shredded and I lost my stomach. The surgeries trying to fix it wore me out. Now I can only do hero work for 3 hours a day. Rest of the time, this is what I look like. I don't recall you getting in a fight that put you in the hospital. I thought you didn't like heroes. I have a low opinion, doesn't mean I don't pay attention to the news. Yeah, well, you never heard about it because I wanted to keep it quiet. Izuku's expression soured further, having a feeling that he knew where this was headed. I'm supposed to be the guy who's always smiling, the symbol of peace. People say I keep smiling because I'm not afraid anything, when in reality, I'm absolutely terrified. I just smile to hide it. I got into the hero business because I wanted people to never have to fear anything anymore and smile with the knowledge that they are safe. If they found out what happened and how scared I really am, then they all lose that smile. Izuku softened a bit, hearing the sincerity in the pro-hero's voice. Despite my injury and others telling me to retire, I kept going. Doing as much as I can within my time limit. So you hide in the crowd when you run out of time. Sounds kinda pathetic to me. Downright hypocritical. All Might said nothing to that, silently agreeing with the boy. Anyway, you said something about this villain having something. He asked. Oh right, that villain. His vision got blurry and the world started to spin. With so little sleep, the shock of potentially losing his partner combined with that impromptu flight, the green-haired boy was running on pure adrenaline and he'd reached the tail end of the shot after All Might's story. That villain stole something of. Izuku immediately passed out after the rush had ran out. All Might ran up to the downed youth and checked him. He's out cold. The kid did look like he hadn't slept in a while now. All Might pulled out the bottle and saw what the boy had been after. That ring in there must be what he was talking about, must be very important to him for such a creepy-looking thing. He replaced the bottle into his pant pocket. I gotta get this guy to the nearest police station, they should be able to get it out without any problems but I don't want to leave such a young kid alone here. All Might picked the young boy up, carrying him piggyback. Hope you appreciate this, hero hater. It had taken a few hours but the horror finally caught a grip on this quirk, power. Now was for the final test. It activated its new quirk and added a bit of its own power. With that done, it walked to the window, transformed its arm into its true state and thrusted it into the sunlight. The results were most satisfying to the monster in human skin, as a sinister grin formed on the horror's face. It walked out the door, not caring it left the door wide open where passers-by who could see the mess he left. After walking for some time, it came across a rather large gathering of humans, cheering for another on some stage. All that practice has made me hungry again. Izuku's eyes slid open to the sight of an office ceiling. Out of his peripheral vision, he saw a few police officers, meaning he was in a police station. Finally, standing in the corner was the gaunt form of the #1 hero in the world, All Might. Easily making the connection as to how he got here, Izuku sat up, feeling a little refreshed after that brief nap. You were out for a while. I didn't want to leave you alone while unconscious. Izuku muttered a thanks, before the hero held out his hand. Zaruba between his fingers. We managed to get this out of the bottle. I assume this is what you were talking about earlier. Yeah, it's a family heirloom, Izuku responded before taking the ring and returning it to its place on his left hand. There was a moment of awkward silence before All Might spoke again. Did you want to contact your mother, young Midoriya? Izuku glanced at the skeleton man, curious of how he learned his name. Said skeleton man picked up on this. An officer ran your student ID through the database. That explains that. No, I was heading home anyway. I also heard from one of the officers and, for whatever it's worth, I'm sorry about your father. That's what everyone says, Izuku muttered as he got up, grabbed his bag and made for the door. As he nearly passed All Might, the blonde placed a gentle hand on the green-haired boy's shoulder. I actually do understand your feelings a little. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably feel the same. But, we're not all like how Victory was. A lot of us really just want to help people with everything that we got. I hope that, maybe, you see that one day. Izuku said nothing to that as All Might removed his hand, allowing the boy to leave without resistance. He kept going until he was on the street a few yards away from the station before he looked back. He could make out a blonde man rushing out of the station, most likely All Might off to another scene. The boy thought back on what the hero told him of why he got into the hero business and why he keeps going despite of his injury. While he may have been rather harsh on the guy, All Might was the first hero to earn back a little of Izuku's respect. It was about this time Zaruba spoke up after a long while of silence. That was certainly an experience. You all right? He asked holding up his hand. I thought I was gonna suffocate in that walking sewage. How? You don't even have lungs, Izuku asked with a wry grin. It's not the point, it's the principle. The principle. Zaruba didn't respond, something that made Izuku uneasy. Izuku, I'm sensing a horror. But, what is it? For me to sense it so well like this only happens at night, when the horrors are at their strongest. But it's midday, I know, it doesn't make any sense. Izuku's features hardened. Where is it? The scene before Izuku was not too unfamiliar to anyone living in this day and age. A small fire, wrecked equipment and stage and heroes facing an adversary holding a hostage. The single twist in this often repeated scenario was that the one holding the hostage was no villain but a monster from a nightmarish realm, a horror. The horror appeared as a large, brown raptor-like humanoid bird, but it had an eye-like stone in its chest and one on its head while several small eyes ran across its sides and back. A horror, in broad daylight, and it's Stolos of all horrors. In the darkness of night, it drives its limbs into shadows to strike from any possible angle. The darker the shadow, the stronger the attack. It should be at its weakest, especially since it's noon when the sun is at its apex. Then how is it here? I don't know. We'll worry about it later. We got a horror to slay, the young Makai Knight declared as he reached for something in his bag. Bakugo stared in fascination and shock. Barely a few hours ago, he was semi-dragged along to see the last Arisu ride a concert, of which he was secretly a fan. And he couldn't deny that he found her cute. He would out loud but not in his mind. Then some scrawny nobody just casually walks onto the stage, throws security like they were dolls and transforms into the freakiest, most grotesque bird monster he had ever seen before grabbing Arisu off her feet and looked as if to eat her. Then the local pro heroes showed up but the freak didn't even flinch when Death Arms punched him in the face. The other heroes threw their quirks at the thing but he just shrugged them off like they were nothing. A new hero with a gigantification quirk was beeper punched and was instantly out of the fight. The bird monster seemed to find it funny and started challenging anyone, hero or not, to take his hostage from his hand. Bakugo was about to take that challenge before he shouted in surprise and pain when someone had used his head as a jumping platform. Stolos was preoccupied with taunting the pro heroes, taunting them into trying to take the girl from it, that he didn't see someone coming down from above until it was nearly too late. It paid little mind to it since whatever quirks these humans had were hardly a threat to it. That arrogance came back to haunt it when it let out an inhuman roar of pain, having its arm cut in half. The newcomer revealed to be a boy now holding a sword shaped like a Chinese jian. But such a sword should be useless against it, unless Soul Metal. He's a Makai Knight. Stolas grabbed its severed arm and reattached it, then roared at the young knight who dared to interfere. Izuku took a stance as Arisu crawled away, but Stolas wasn't about to let its meal escape. A quick swing of its arm fired a volley of bladed feathers, but the green-haired boy deflected each one. This would normally be a good time to make an escape, but Arisu was rooted in place at the battle about to take place. We need to do something about those people, we can't be seen. No time. This thing will just go after them, we gotta take it down here and now. This exchange did not go unnoticed by the pop idol or a few in earshot. Who is he talking to? And who is talking back for that matter? The two charged at each other, with Stolas taking a swipe at the boy only to be blocked by his blade. The horror tried another overhead attack, to which the green-haired knight blocked with his arm, then followed into a judo throw off the stage. Just as Stolas hit the ground, Izuku jumped after it, leading into a dropkick into the monster's abdomen, fracturing the concrete surface beneath them with the force of the impact. Within the crowd, students and teachers of Aldera Junior High watched the spectacle in awe. While many had identified the unknown hero's clothes as that of their school uniform, he was moving around too much to get a good look as to his identity. Some had commented that the youth resembled one Izuku Midoriya, but many dismissed that claim under the impression that a quirkless nobody wouldn't be able to anything like this guy. Bakugo didn't hear nor paid any attention to his classmates' gossip. He was more focused on the guy who used him as a literal stepping stone. I'm gonna blast that beeper to Kingdom Come for that. Off to the side, All Might watched the fight in fascination. The kid he met earlier was fighting this creature on even ground, whereas the other heroes struggled to even hurt it. Even the new kid, MT. Lady, taken out in one hit. And yet this boy, who had a clear disdain for heroes, was going toe-to-toe with the monster with but low to mid-tier level of super strength and a sword, and seemed to be winning. The person of interest had just delivered a powerful kick, then back-flipped away from the monster. While still in the air, Zaruba surveyed the scene and relayed his thoughts to his partner. The watchdog is not gonna like this. I am a Makai Knight. I took an oath to protect humans from horrors. There's a horror in front of us and humans behind us, and I will do what I am sworn to do, consequences be damned. The youth then drew a circle of light while still in midair, summoning his armor before landing on his feet. The crowd and pro-heroes gaped in surprise. Death Arms and Kamui Woods instantly recognized the familiar golden-clad warrior as the former of the two shouted. It's that gold guy from last night. GARO. GARO took a low stance, sword arm back with the blade pointed forward, his free arm held up in a guard as the blade edge scraped against the bracer shield like Ryuga Dugai does. Stolas crouched low before releasing a roar and charged at the knight. GARO did the same and the two clashed, unleashing a mild shockwave upon the two colliding. GARO slashing at the bird horror with said monster using bladed feathers on its arm as a makeshift weapon. A surprise knee to the stomach forced Stolas to hunch over, allowing the Golden Knight to wrap his arm around its neck and flip the monster onto his back. The knight then went for a stabbing attack, only for the bird monster to lash out with its feet talons. As the fight carried on, GARO kept thinking back on something Zaruba mentioned earlier about this horror, that it could use the shadows as a means to attack from anywhere. So why hadn't it done it already? A glance at the environment made the answer clear. Stolas, in its eagerness, had failed to take into account that shadows are different in the day. While it could now freely move around despite the purifying sun rays, but that was about it. It couldn't utilize its powers effectively with so few disconnected shadows in an open area as this. And said horror was becoming very aware of this shortcoming. GARO, feeling it best to before Stolas starts to become desperate, pushed the monster away and drew his Medu lighter. After lighting it with a flick of the wrist, he ran it across the blade, engulfing the blade in a green blaze. The Golden Knight twirled his sword, a trail of fire following it, before the circuit line across his armor began glowing neon green as he charged again at the horror. What happened next for the crowd watching had to be the biggest middle finger to physics they had ever seen. GARO then threw his sword to the side, turning it into a burning saw blade, before jumping over the horror. The aforementioned blade arced around before slashing Stolas as it passed by. To their shock, it came back around and slashed it again. Then it did it again. And again. And again. And again. During this, GARO had landed on one of the still standing stage supports, perpendicularly, as in he was standing parallel to the ground. His sword then returned to his hand, still ablaze, before he pushed off the scaffolding and gliding down, his two-bladed tails clearly not acting as wings or anything of the sort, and delivering a large slash through the horror. Skidding to halt as he passed, GARO kept his sword arm outstretched as the green glow faded. Both GARO and Stolas were still for but a moment before the latter erupted into flames, roaring in pain and thrashing about. It was then the Golden Knight noticed that Arisu was still present. "Why are you still here? Get out of here, now!" GARO scolded the pop idol. The horror suddenly lunged at the Golden Knight. Said knight brandished his sword for one last strike before both stopped. "Why? You were right, I really am a hypocrite." Because All Might was now here, the hulking hero blocking the burning appendage from its intended target. "I told you that there are heroes who help those in need with all that they are. And yet, I wasn't practicing what I preached." The pro-hero threw the monster's offending limb away, blood seeping from his mouth. Real heroes put it all on the line for justice. GARO saw All Might wind up for one of his famous punches. He quickly grabbed the pop idol by the back of her outfit before throwing her to the crowd, right into Bakugo's arms. DETROOOOOOOIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIIII. Stolas came back for one last attack. SMAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA had become a tornado of green fire, Stolos roaring in agony as it was incinerated. All the heroes present had to shield the bystanders from the localized squall. GARO was held in place by his sword while holding a firm grip to keep from flying away. When it had all subsided, nothing remained of the monster save for a red-hot mark in the pavement. A roll of thunder drew everyone's attention to the sky as rain began to fall. Death Arms returned his gaze to All Might and the golden warrior near him. "He changed the weather," he said in awe. The rain picked up, starting to cool the superheated concrete, creating steam. At the same time, the GARO armor disengaged, leaving a panting Izuku exposed to the world had the rising steam not obscured some of his features. The steam thickened, forcing Mt. Lady to fan it away with her hands, only to reveal the boy had disappeared again. Death Arms sighed in defeat before muttering to himself. "He got away again, what the hell is going on here?" The television crews went into full news mode, swarming the heroes and the rescued idol. Each questioning what had happened. What was that monster? Was that boy a new hero or sidekick? Bakugo, however, was focused on the spot where the golden armored warrior had been. The steam may have been thick, but he could definitely make out the warrior's hairstyle when his armor disappeared, and it was hair that looked very familiar. Deku. It had been an hour after the horror attack at the concert. Izuku was now walking home as the sun set. "I can't believe I dozed off after that fight," he muttered with another yawn. "Well, you were running on fumes and adrenaline for the second time today, so it's no surprise to me. Though I highly recommend you don't do that again, it's not healthy." "No argument there. And I thought you said that Stolos thing was trouble." "I said he was strongest at night, I never said he was smart." Izuku had no response for that and just kept walking. "We still have to hear it from the watchdog about exposing yourself to the public back there," Zaruba reminded the young knight. "I know, but I really don't care right now. I just want to climb into bed and sleep for a month." Suddenly, a familiar blonde hero came skidding into the street. "I am here. All Might, what are you doing here? I figured you would be occupied with the paparazzi." "Take it easy, champ, we've both had a long day," Izuku said as he pat the deflated hero on the back as said hero hacked and coughed. Once the number one hero got it under control, he turned to the young Makai Knight. "Young man, I wanted to talk to you about what happened back there and also," All Might began before Izuku held up his hand. "Hold that thought," he said, then pointed behind All Might. At the end of the street stood the maid attendant of the Watchdog Center, her hands clasped in front as she spoke with a tone that betrayed nothing. "Golden Knight GARO and number one hero All Might," the latter flinched at someone else knowing his secret. "The Watchdog wishes to see you both, it's urgent. Kagero Okuda, known in the underworld as Garen, TSKED at the site before him. Cops had surrounded the meeting place while bringing out body bags that seemed not even half full. Media vultures buzzing around asking questions and facing cameras, some pointing to the open door where blood practically painted the inside walls. He pulled out his bunny phone and dialed a certain number. "We have an issue. The meeting place for the first batch of guys was turned into a slaughterhouse," he said into the phone. "No, I didn't leave anything there that could lead back to you. We got a live one." One cop called out, catching Okuda's attention. Being carried to a stretcher was a tall, scruffy-looking man with green hair and thick lips. Okuda knew there was the possibility the schmuck might talk and the cops could piece something together with evidence of so many low-ranked villains meeting up for some reason. But his client wanted to be as discreet as possible, so he made sure that the offer was kept extremely vague, just in case. He suddenly recalled another matter his client wanted for him to do. "We may be able to salvage this. You still need a volunteer for that special project of yours, right?" At the Midoriya household, Inko sat in the living room, book in hand. Time had changed her a bit drastically from the slim woman of Izuku's youth to a portly one, rather surprising for a Makai priestess. In her heyday, she was quite accomplished, having developed spellcasting techniques without a Medu brush that earned her fame in the order and the eye of the father of her child. However, she was also known to be rather reckless in hunts and had gotten hurt numerous times to the point that the pain from the accumulated injuries became too much and was forced to retire. Today was one of many where she would kick back and read one of her favorite books, but, as one individual noted, she had been on that same page for several minutes and her eyes and mind seemed elsewhere. She was drawn back to earth when a small cup and saucer was placed on the table next to her. She glanced at it, then to the one who placed it there, a middle-aged in a neatly pressed suit and glasses with a warm smile. "Peppermint tea, it does wonders for anxiety." She gave the man a small smile as she took a sip. "Thank you, Gonza, it really helps. I'd hazard a guess that you are concerned about Master Izuku. I can't help but worry. He's had 9 horror hunts this week alone." Gonza winced a little at that comment before he sighed, catching her attention, and said, "Better make that 10. Inko looked up at the butler, puzzled, before he presented his phone, which had a live news feed active. Known individual waltzed on stage during the performance and took the pop idol hostage after throwing security away. Local heroes attempted to intervene until the assailant transformed into what witnesses describe as a freaky bird monster. Said monster kept the heroes at bay until the sudden arrival of what appears to be a junior high school student wielding a sword. Arisu Raida was freed while the young man fought the monster and then appeared to transform into golden armor. The battle continued up until the armored individual lit his sword on fire and set the bird assailant ablaze. It finally came to a close when All Might stepped in and ended it with one of his special attacks. However, before authorities could question the young man, he disappeared in the confusion. The screen shifted to an image, likely taken from a cell phone, of a very familiar golden armor of a certain Makai Knight. It then changes to the young idol. "I didn't get to see his face before he put that armor on, but I think that thing called him GARO." While the heroes were victorious, many are asking, what was that bird creature? Who is this GARO? And where did he come from? The Midoriya matriarch's face fell. It was bad enough that a Makai Knight was caught on camera and in front of ordinary people, but the fact it was her own son made it worse. The news anchor stopped for a moment to listen to her earpiece. "This just in, it seems that Japan is not the only one with a young man in armor." "Oh great, now what? Am I here to get yelled at?" Izuku asked as stabbed his sword into the wolf statue. "Under normal circumstances, yes, you would be, however, that is not the case this time. Your battle with the horror Stolos was not an isolated incident, there have been other attacks in full public view across the globe." Quote, "Speaking of Featherface, how is it that it was able to walk around in broad daylight?" "We're not sure yet. Tell me something. The last thing anyone needs is horrors even during the day," Izuku demanded indignantly. As this was going, All Might kept looking between the two, totally lost in confusion. That maid dragged him and the boy to some remote area of the city, a wall of all places, before Midoriya held up his ring and said wall opened up into a long dark hall. If that weren't enough, they entered a room with a woman that would make Uwabami and Midnight jealous, and now, young Midoriya was talking to her like she was his boss or something. Can someone explain what is going on here? He asked. The two glanced at him before Izuku gestured to the watchdog, the latter of which turned to the number one hero. Since time out of mind, humanity has been prey to demons of darkness known as horrors. These vile beings enter our world through gates, created by the vices of humanity: greed, envy, despair, anger, pride, you name it. They possess those with these evils, devouring their souls and assuming their identities. They then prowl the night, searching for people to feed on. What does that have to do with you? We are known as the Makai Order. We have been around nearly as long as the horrors first came through. Our duty is to protect humanity from these monsters, hunting them down to the ends of the earth. We deploy agents in the form of Makai priests and Makai Knights. So then young Midoriya here, he has inherited the title of the Golden Knight. You could say he's our version of you. You'd force children to fight these monsters. All Might bellowed in shock. No one forced me to do anything, Izuku interrupted. The choice to be a Makai Knight was mine and mine alone. His father, the previous GARO, originally intended to pass his armor to someone else and spare his son from this life. However, that changed, Fenris added. Why would he change his mind? Because I'm quirkless. That little comment gave Izuku All Might's undivided attention. When I was a kid, all I wanted was to be a hero like you. Yet at 4 years old, my quirk still hadn't come in. So I went to the doctors and they told me I was in the minority that would never develop a quirk. Izuku then held up his left hand, gazing at his ring. It felt like my whole world fell apart. I was picked on once all the kids found out, and even their parents would say I wouldn't amount to anything. Then my dad came up to me and asked if I wanted to be a different kind of hero by becoming a Makai Knight. And you agreed without knowing what you were getting into. I did know. He told me exactly what I would end up doing. Sometimes I think my dad wanted me to say no that day. But I still stand by my decision and have never regretted it. All Might took a moment to digest everything that the young man and the woman had told him. These people, they've been fighting against monsters like that bird thing for so long. And this kid, their best agent, and he goes into battle with nothing but a sword and his armor. Hard to believe he does it all without a queer wait a minute. Hold on, if you don't have a quirk, how were you able to throw that monster around like that? Oh, that. Makai Knights are trained to superhuman levels to compete with horrors. What you saw before was pure muscle. Geez, these guys don't mess around, the symbol of peace thought with a sweat drop. As you can see, Makai Knights are thoroughly prepared, with or without quirks. Yeah, no kidding, agreed All Might, only to perk up in realization. Wait. Who said that? He asked, looking around. I did. Izuku sighed before holding up his left hand, pointing his skull ring at the puzzled pro-hero. Hello. The ring is talking, he exclaimed, hacking up blood. The name is Zaruba, and my thanks for getting me out of that living cesspool. I don't know how much more of this I can take today. All Might thought wearily. While this is entertaining to watch, shall we get back to the main topic? Fenris asked. Right, how was that fugly bird able to act unhindered despite it being midday? Izuku asked hotly. Some of our agents and allies are looking into it now. When we have new information, we'll let you know. Another pressing matter is that the public not only saw the horror in you in armor but others as well across the world. With our numbers stretched so thin, containing this is becoming impossible. And the Senate, an emergency meeting was called to discuss options. However, I think it's safe to say that they are seriously considering what we spoke of this morning. Beep me, Izuku thought to himself, and I hate to say it but I'm starting to agree. Beep me sideways, sorry kid, but I'm afraid discretion is a luxury we can no longer afford. The young man groaned in frustration. And once again, through it all Might was confused. Excuse me again but, he butted in, hand raised like a student, what exactly is this about? The subject I was speaking of to GARO here is that we may have to reveal ourselves to the public and work with the governments and hero agencies. It's also the reason I asked you here as well, Fenris explained. It is, yes. As the highest-ranking hero in the world, we would appreciate any cooperation and aid in the transition from our original clandestine position into a more open one should it come to that. Quote, this is quite a lot to take in. Hypothetically, what if I turned it down? We'll simply carry on without you, she said as if it were obvious, surprising the blonde hero. That's it, not even gonna hold my secret hostage if I say no. Please, we're not evil. And holding it over you doesn't benefit us in the long run. Speaking of which, you and that maid were awfully calm about seeing me like this. That's because my fellow watchdogs and other members of the order already knew. Wait, this time Izuku butted in, you already knew about this. How come no one said anything? At the time, it wasn't important to your mission. And I figured you wouldn't have cared given your opinion on pro heroes. Izuku frowned at the flippant answer. I'd say that concludes this meeting. All Might, do take some time to think on our proposal, we will await your answer. And as for you, Garo, run along home and get some rest. Passing out twice in one day is very concerning. I'm not even gonna question how you know about that, too, Izuku muttered as he turned and left, the skeletal frame of All Might following behind him. A short walk and closing door, wall later, All Might turning around and knocking on the second part, the younger of the duo made for home. Young Midoriya, how exactly am I supposed to find you people when I come to a decision? That woman never explained that part. My guess, you come find me, you already saw my student ID so you know where I go. I suppose that makes sense though I better not show up in my muscle form. The last thing I need is questions of why I'm visiting a junior high school out of the blue. Now if you'll excuse me, my bed is calling me, Izuku said as he pointed his thumb into the distance. And a mother at home who was gonna have a serious conniption about today, Zaruba added. You just had to say it, the young Makai Knight sighed out as he walked away. As the two, one boy and one talking ring, still trying to wrap his mind around that left, All Might kept his gaze on the young man. He thought back to what had happened today, what he saw, what he heard. All of it seemed too fantastic to be real. But most of all, this young man before him, with no special powers, had risked his life numerous times to protect people from evil monsters and asked for absolutely nothing in return, no recognition, no fortune, nothing. All Might felt a twinge in his heart. This boy reminded him of why he pursued the life he did in the first place. Then another thought crossed his mind. Is he the one I've been searching for? School the following day was an odd change of pace. Rather than taunting him, most of Izuku's classmates were engrossed in gossip about the new hero, Garo. Tons of questions flew around like, who was he? Where did he come from? Where did he get that armor? There was even talk how he may be one of the students here since many saw that he wore their school uniform. How cute, you have fans, Zaruba whispered into his ear, jokingly. Shut it, Izuku whispered back. A few students, however, were casting glances at the young knight, particularly those who tended to hang out with Bakugo. The aforementioned teen was glaring, as if he was searching for something, at Izuku. It soon all came to a stop when the homeroom teacher came in. All right, settle down. I know it was a rather thrilling day yesterday, but it's time to get back into it. Hey Teach, is it true that this Garo guy is a student here? One student with a long nose asked, catching Izuku's attention. I don't know, nor am I at liberty to discuss that. I heard one guy said he thought it was Midoriya, another with stretching fingers said as he thumbed at said boy. No way it was Midoriya. That guy had super strength and some kind of telekinesis quirk, a third with sharp teeth added, prompting the rest of the class to laugh. Here we go again, Izuku thought, rolling his eyes. Commissioner General Tanzawa felt the tension in the air as the various ministers entered the room. The Japanese cabinet had called an emergency meeting in regards to the recent development in the Spike of Horrors. Even the Emperor was present. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't on edge as well. To have one of history's most terrible secrets thrown out into the open is very serious. Thoughts of the concerns and panic it's no doubt causing made him fear it will only get worse. The last person to enter was not a minister but the senatorial watchdog of the region, Amon, who sat down next to him. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, the Prime Minister began. As you are all aware, there's been a number of incidents happening across the globe. Yes, the monster attacks and those armored individuals that fought them, the Agriculture Minister said. Do we know anything about them? I have a question as well. One of the younger ministers cut in before gesturing to Amon. Who is he? This is the watchdog Amon. He is a representative of the Makai Order, the Minister of Defense answered, and he is directly involved with the knights you all saw. Knights? What's he talking about? Settle down, everyone. Everything will be explained, the Prime Minister commanded. I am a member of the Makai Order, an organization that spans the globe with but a single mission: to defend humanity against the monstrous beings known as horrors, Amon said. Horrors. The monsters you have seen on the news facing our warriors, the Makai Knights. They are drawn to our world by the vices of humans. They possess those with dark hearts, swallowing their souls and assume their identity before stalking the night for more victims. Many of the older cabinet members remained stone-faced, having already known, but the newer, younger ones seemed shocked and confused. One of them then spoke up. How long has this been going on? Since the dawn of civilization. Why are we only hearing about this now? In the early days, everyone knew. However, as the population began to grow in tandem with the darker human aspects, it began to become difficult to control as the horrors began to grow in numbers. In order to combat this, we opted to erase witnesses' memories and remove evidence of the horrors. Any we missed would be written off as making it up. Eventually, some records of horrors became the inspiration for human myths like vampires and werewolves and such. Why don't we just have the numerous heroes handle the problem? Another of the younger ministers asked. We learned early on that horrors are resistant or even immune to most quirks. Despite their still unknown origins, quirks are still rooted in science and only something as supernatural as the horrors themselves can harm them. Which brings us back to the topic of this meeting, the Prime Minister said. Recently, horror activity has been on the rise. The Makai Order is stretched rather thin and maintaining the confidentiality of the situation has now taken a serious blow. Not only are the numbers rising, but some have even displayed abilities they shouldn't have. Tanzawa took that as his cue to stand. Excuse me, sir, but I believe we may have an answer to the latter of that. Yes, Commissioner General, we managed to recover images of the horror GARO fought before it transformed and ran the host through facial recognition. The man it possessed was small-time criminal with a rap sheet of assault and robbery. What caught our attention was his quirk, the ability to bend light and make the area he occupies dark. That would explain how it was able to operate unhindered in the day, Amon hummed. What do you mean? Asked one of the young officials. Aside from our weapons and spells, horrors have only one other weakness: natural light from the sun. It severely weakens them, so they stick to hunting at night. Indeed, and the reports of some of them having extra powers they normally don't have led to our theory that they are actively seeking out those with strong quirks to supplement their own abilities. That is troubling news. I know, sir. However, we believe this may be only a trial run since some have either not helped or actually hindered the horrors, Tanzawa finished before sitting back down. I suppose that's some comfort. The Makai Senate has decided that in order to continue with their mission, they are willing to go public and work with law enforcement and hero agencies. As such, it is very important to aid the order in any way we can. One of the main issues is a means for them to operate without restrictions while in the field. Before we get into that, Prime Minister, I'd like to ask the Commissioner General something, the Minister of Education chimed in. You mentioned the GARO individual that appeared in Musudafu. Are you familiar with him? She asked. Only by reputation. I've never met him in person, Tanzawa said. So is it true that he is a junior high student? He started his 3rd year. Yes, Amon cut in. You would allow agents that young? The minister gasped. All knights and priests start their training young. GARO fully took up the mantle when he was 12. What? Another morning at Aldera Junior High, and the more things change, the more they stay the same. It had been a few weeks since the midday horror attack, exposing the Makai Order to the world. Thankfully, the number of horrors eased up since then, much to the relief of Izuku's sleep schedule. And yet, despite revealing that there were real man-eating monsters out there, all his schoolmates could talk about was heroes, most of which was about the new hero, GARO. There were still rumors of Midoriya being GARO, but many were quick to dismiss that and started to dwindle. What did persist was the rumor of the mystery hero being a student at their school, with a few claiming to actually know who GARO is. Another thing that had changed was an official public reveal of the Order and the horrors they fight at a press conference. In a world where superpowers are the norm, the people took it pretty well. Surprisingly, the only hiccup thus far is the mixed opinions on the Makai Order. On the positive end of the spectrum, there are those praising the Order and its members for the long and difficult crusade they have endured for so long, some viewing them as the first heroes, some even asking how to join the Order. On the other end are those who question why such a thing was kept secret from them, whether or not the Order is trustworthy, and then there's some who view the Order as little more than a group of vigilantes and that the horrors should be left to the pro-heroes. As if they could do anything to them. Izuku snorted to himself as he walked up to his shoe locker. Unfortunately, that part about them being vigilantes was technically true. While some argued that there is no precedence for horror attacks in regards to law enforcement protocol, some of the more stubborn officials refused to back down on their stance on the questionable legality of the Order's activities. As a temporary solution, the Order and government came to a compromise and decided that all active field agents were to be accompanied by a licensed hero on the condition that they do not interfere with the hunt. That came down from the top just after Izuku's last hunt and hasn't had one since, as discussions were still going on for a more permanent solution. That was until last night, and he did not like their solution. But it seemed that he was going to have to deal with it eventually, for when he opened his locker, there was an oh-so-familiar red envelope. New orders. After taking a quick glance around to see if anyone was watching, he snatched the order and hid it in his jacket, a quick change of his normal shoes for school ones, and he was off to class. The students already there paid him no mind as he walked in and took his seat, ignoring out whatever the latest gossip was about or other frivolous talk until the homeroom teacher came in. Then came announcements regarding school events and such. A few questions came for the teacher but nothing of note, so Izuku just tuned it all out, really. The minutes ticked by before the first class of the day was to begin. The teacher looked up from his papers. "Oh, and Midoriya," the teacher calling for the green-haired boy's attention, "you still have yet to turn in any options for a high school. I need to remind you that the deadline is the end of the week." "Like it matters," one student muttered, earning a few chuckles. Izuku sighed as he pulled a slip of paper out of his bag before walking up and placing it on the desk. He then promptly returned to his seat. "Midoriya, am I reading this right that you put UA as a high school option?" Under protest, the boy grumbled as he sat back down, his mind recalling the discussion with the watchdog last night. Flashback. "The Senate and world governments have come to an agreement that will allow us to continue our mission," Fenris told the young Makai Knight. "However, there is one small catch, and you're probably not gonna like it." "And that is?" Izuku asked. "All knights and priests will be required to obtain hero licenses in order to operate independently, otherwise, they will need to be supervised by pro-heroes." "You can't be serious." "We don't like it either, but due to many stubborn officials, the Hero Public Safety Commission in particular, it was the best compromise that could be achieved. This was the decision from up top." Flashback end. As he expected, 99% of the class burst out laughing. "You can't be serious, Midoriya." Said boy simply rolled his eyes. "Deku." A familiar voice raged out before the top of his desk was burnt in a small explosion. "You know that's school property, right?" Izuku asked, not even flinching at Bakugo's sudden action. "Shove it. What the beep is this? I thought you hated heroes." "I have a low opinion." "Then why are you applying for a hero school?" "As I said earlier, under protest." "The beep is that supposed to mean?" "Bakugo." The teacher started, catching the blonde attention. "Please calm down and return to your seat." The blonde huffed but complied. The teacher then returned his attention to the green-haired boy. "Now Midoriya, are you sure about this? Given your personal history and your... If you trying to dissuade because I'm quirkless, don't bother." The teacher in class was silent for a moment before the former shrugged and muttered something that sounded like, "Your funeral." "Come on, Midoriya, you wouldn't last a minute against a villain. Even less against those horror monsters. What can you even do?" The class erupted into laughter again. Maybe it was because they were going to find out eventually, or maybe it was because he was sick and tired of all this, but what Izuku said next left them silent. 1000 says you're wrong. Bakugo tapped his foot furiously, impatiently waiting for school to end for the day. He couldn't believe what he heard this morning. Deku, hero fanboy turned hero hater Deku, was applying for a high school. None of this made sense to him. He and his family was certain the victory scandal had killed any and all enthusiasm the green-haired boy had for the pro-hero field. Now, all of a sudden he's aiming for not only a hero school, but the best in Japan. And what the hell did he mean he was going, under protest? In any case, as soon as the bell rung, he was going to get answers to this, one way or another. He didn't have to wait much longer as the bell sounded and the teacher called an end to class. Bakugo wasted no time standing and moving to make a beeline for the quirkless teen's desk, only to find it already vacant. It took a moment for Ashen Blonde to process that his target had already escaped the classroom before anyone else had noticed. He then began to boil in anger. The beep, Dego. All Might checked the paper in his hand before looking up at the, well, house, would be too modest of a word. It was a 2-story mansion that he'd bet his healthy lung that had, at minimum, 20 rooms. He had gotten this letter from that maid that worked for that watchdog woman with instructions to meet up with young Midoriya for a horror hunt at this address. He could only assume that this place was the boy's home. Either being a Makai Knight pays really well or he's from old money, or both, All Might thought to himself. Catching movement in his peripheral vision, the blonde hero turned to find Izuku casually walking through the front gate. "Ah, young Midoriya, nice to see you again." Was Izuku's reply. "Still unfriendly but not as hostile with me like before. Baby steps I guess," All Might thought to himself. So, how soon shall we head out to find this horror monster? Horrors are nocturnal. They're severely weakened during the day. We're gonna have to wait until nightfall to flush it out. Oh, now the symbol of peace felt a little embarrassed for arriving so early. The boy walked past him and stopped at the door. He then turned back to the blonde hero. "You welcome to come in, it's gonna be while before it gets dark." Well, at least he's being courteous, All Might thought as he approached the door. "I'm home," Izuku declared as he walked through the door. From out of one room came a man with glasses, a trimmed mustache and short beard in a crisp suit. He smiled and bowed. "Welcome home, Master Izuku." He then turned to All Might and bowed as well. "And I bid you welcome as well, sir. Gonza Kurohashi, butler and retainer to the Midoriya family," he introduced himself. "Of course he has a butler. Izuku, is that you?" A woman's voice came from down the hall. Soon, a second person came down the hall, this time a portly middle-aged woman with long green hair, probably Izuku's mother. "Yeah, Mom." The woman smiled in greeting, then noticed the unfamiliar skeletal man in a plain white shirt and cargo pants. "Oh, who's this?" Hi, it's All Might, Mom," Izuku cut in as he made for his room. "What the hell, kid?" the pro-hero shouted indignantly. "Wow, I had heard you were injured a few years ago but I didn't think it was this bad," the woman responded to her son's answer. "Oh, come on," All Might thought in exasperation at the Midoriya matriarch's statement. "Do they all know?" Gonza cleared his throat, catching the hero's attention. "May I offer you anything, sir? Tea or coffee, perhaps?" Tea will be fine. It's easier on me after I lost my stomach." "Ah, then I must recommend ginger tea for such a condition." The symbol of peace was escorted to the living room where, minutes later, he was presented with hot cup of tea. The boy's mother, Inko, sat across from him with her own cup. "This must be strange for you, all this monsters and magic stuff, huh?" she asked with some mirth. "I admit it was a lot to take in at first. Does that mean you are a Makai Knight as well?" "No, I'm a Makai priestess, or was, anyway. I'm retired. Only men can be knights." "Why's that?" "Originally, the order was very traditional when it came to the knighthood, only men could do it. But as time passed, that belief went away. However, that was a moot point. See, the armors are not built with the female form in mind and, while they can change size to fit the wearer, they can't alter their shape to so, especially since they've been upgraded in recent years. And we can't make more since soul metal is becoming scarce. I see. Forgive me if I'm stepping out of line, but does it ever bother you, letting your son go out to do such dangerous tasks? Every time he goes out, I worry. I honestly didn't want this life for him. It takes a toll on the body and mind. I made my husband promise me that he would pass the armor down to someone else so Izuku could have a normal life, but when he was diagnosed quirkless and the bullying began, things just spiraled. He was once told me that he wanted to be a hero when he was younger, All Might said, to which the green-haired woman giggled. Did he tell you that he looked up to you in particular? I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise, lots of people do. Izuku, however, he would watch your debut video several times a day. But he changed when Inko trailed off. I know, I can't imagine what that must feel like. They remained in silence for some time before Izuku came back out, now dressed in his white and black duster, cargo pants, boots and armored vest, his sword firmly in his grip as he looked at All Might. It's time. As if on cue, Gonza came in with a neatly wrapped bento and handed it to his young charge, with a comment of not fighting on an empty stomach. Inko wished him luck and to some home safely. The two then exited the mansion with All Might offering to drive them to where they needed to go. Izuku thanked him for the offer. Where we headed? All Might asked the boy as he opened the driver's side door. The Besupan district, he said before sitting down in the passenger seat. The horror is close, said Zaruba. All Might and Izuku briskly walked down the street of the area that had been narrowed down for the hunt. The former remained in his skeletal form as means to conserve his time and energy as well as not to draw attention, while the latter maintained a distance ahead to scout out the target. Izuku took note of everyone he passed on the street. After a few more minutes, he felt his Madu ring vibrate to get his attention. All Might, having seen the boy suddenly stop, approached him. What is it? The horror is now moving away from us. Was it onto us? All Might questioned. Izuku, however, remained quiet as he mulled over the possible answers. There wasn't any indication of someone panicking and running away, so the horror couldn't have gotten wise. The next probability was that they simply passed it. The green-haired boy then focused all the people they passed just before Zaruba alerted them. A couple of punks trying to look tough, a group of school girls, a mother walking with her baby in a stroller, the odd businessman heading home reeking of alcohol. Nothing that would seem out of place, to the untrained eye. Izuku thought back to every little detail of the people he saw, and one stood out, causing him to look behind him. Something wicked this way went, he said, eyeing the potential suspect. A young mother with a stroller turned the corner, humming a tune and her child cooing to the melody, before someone poked out from an alleyway, instantly catching her attention. Good evening, ma'am. All Might. Pardon my abruptness, but we're currently on the trail of a dastardly villain and I was hoping I could ask you some question to his whereabouts. My associate and I, could I borrow a few minutes of your time, ma'am? Not seeing anything wrong, the woman shrugged and followed the symbol of peace down the way. I apologize for taking you down this way, I wanted to avoid any undue attention. It's all right, I doubt anyone would bother me with you here. Then let's start with the first question. Are you human? A new voice jumped in. She turned to the voice to find a hooded young man holding up something. He then flipped the lid open, revealing it to be some kind of lighter. He thumbed the ignition, lighting it, producing a green flame. The woman stared into the flame, her eyes glowing an evil red in reaction, something that did not escape Izuku's notice. Guess not. The woman hissed and kicked at All Might. Fortunately he was able to raise his guard in time, but the force of the blow did send him back a few feet. She then turned back to Izuku and lashed out with a fist. The green-haired teen blocked it with his sheathed sword before spinning into a kick to her head, sending her flying. She quickly recovered and leapt high into the air to dive-bomb the boy. Izuku braced himself at the approaching woman before twisting around and delivering a draw slash to the disguised monster, then sheathed the blade. She landed hard on the ground and began to convulse before her body swelled up and exploded in gore, revealing a horned black skeletal fiend. Izuku charged forward, his sheathed sword held high to strike, before the horror caught the weapon in its hands only to realize too late that it was a trap. Izuku quickly drew his sword out and ran the blade through the monster, pushing it back and pinning it to the wall. He then pulled the blade out and spun into a kick to the horror's face. He spun again, taking back his sheath, and one final time slashing his sword across the monster's neck. The horror was silent before it dispersed into the ether, Izuku sheathing his sword with the creature's death. Off to the side, All Might studied his partner, one could say is the best description at the moment. He had been notified beforehand about non-hero licensed Makai agents needing to be accompanied by a licensed pro-hero but were told not to interfere. A part of him was concerned regarding that last bit, especially if there are agents as young Izuku, but he was glad that the boy proved capable of handling the threat. While he was more at ease with young Midoriya's abilities, there was a small thing that bothered him in this whole scenario. "How did you know?" he asked, gaining the boy's attention. The first red flag was the time and place, a young mother walking with a baby late at night. The nearest residential area is a good hour's walk from here at minimum. The second one was she had no supplies, no diaper bag, no baby bottles, no toys. Adding to that, she was in the business district, the Besupan district to be more precise. There's nothing but office buildings for several blocks in about every direction. If the baby had an accident, she would have to travel a good few kilometers to get to the nearest convenience store. "Wow, he's good," All Might muttered to himself, impressed by the teen's detective skills. The cooing of the baby drew the blond man's attention and approached the child before the hooded boy blocked his path, glaring down at the child. Then we come to the third and most important red flag, the small dark spots on the edges of the stroller and the distinct coppery scent of blood, meaning, "Junior, just ate so you can drop the act." To the muscular hero's surprise, the face of the little bundle of joy shifted into a grotesque monstrous beast. Two people, clearly news reporters, creeped up to the edge of the alleyway entrance. One was a woman in business casual attire holding a mic while the other was clearly her cameraman due to the fact he had a news camera mounted on his shoulder. "Are you sure they went this way?" the cameraman asked, a little tired from hauling the large piece of television equipment. "Yeah, a couple saw All Might and a kid head this way. My instincts tell me something big is gonna happen." Her instincts were proven true when a massive explosion rocked the area. From the smoke came All Might and someone in a hooded white and black duster leaping back and away from the center of the blast. The latter of the two's hood fell down, revealing a curly green-haired teenage boy. "What did I tell you?" the woman exclaimed, then turned back to her cameraman. "Start rolling, the boss is gonna." She trailed off when she noticed that, while he was already shooting, he was aiming the camera up high. She followed the line of sight to where her partner was looking before her eyes widened in alarm. The true form of the horror was gigantic, easily 20 meters tall. The head was arrow-shaped with small eyes and small horns atop the crown. The head lead into a dinosaur-like neck, torso and short tail topped with black bony scutes. Two pairs of vestigial arms hung from the quill-covered underside while a massive wing-like, spiked thagomizers jutted out from the shoulders like a pair of awkwardly placed clubs. The legs supporting this monster were avian in nature but ended in spike-like feet. The horror let out screeching roar, multiple mandibles spreading wide, showing endless rows of fangs inside. "The horror Sabnok, he's as nasty as he is big and ugly," Zaruba said, identifying the monster. Izuku glared down the beast. Horrors around this size were always annoying. If it wasn't the collateral damage they cause, it was keeping them hidden before they and the order were revealed. "I didn't think these horrors could get this big," All Might gulped. Izuku glanced at the muscular pro-hero before turning his gaze further behind them. A crowd was quickly gathering. A few police officers and some pro-heroes were just arriving as well, no doubt drawn to the earlier explosion. He then turned back to the gigantic Sabnok. "Get everybody out of here and keep them away. Block off the area for a 3-block radius." "I'll take care of Ugly," ordered Izuku, drawing his sword. Off to the side, the newswoman swallowed the lump in her throat and brought the mic to her lips. This is Satsuki Kido with Musudafu Metro News. Inko and Gonza had the news ready, just in case Izuku was caught on camera again. The former was naturally worried of her son being seen out of old habit. She had to keep reminding herself that everyone now knows about horrors and the order. They didn't have to wait long as a special bulletin popped up to reveal a giant horror staring down a young man in a white coat holding a sword while police and a few heroes, All Might among them, moved the civilians a safe distance away. We are live at the Besupan Business District where a giant monster has appeared out of nowhere. We've yet to get confirmation if this a villain or one of the horror creatures that has become the hot topic recently. The number one pro hero All Might is already on the scene along with a young man that appears to be in his teens with a sword in hand. A new sidekick perhaps, or maybe one of the Makai Knights of the Order that has come under the latest controversy. More heroes and the police have just arrived and are working with All Might to evacuate the area of civilians. However, the young man with the sword is standing his ground. I think he intends to fight that creature. Isn't that Midoriya? What's he doing there? That quirkless idiot is gonna get himself killed. These were the vocal thoughts of many of Aldera Junior High's students and faculty as they watched events unfold from their respective homes. Wait, what's he doing? The Bakugo household was gathered around, dumbfounded as to why Izuku was there with pro heroes, staring down that giant monster. Masaru and Mitsuki made no secret of their concern, the latter especially seeing her old friend's child in a dangerous situation. Katsuki, however, had a sneaking suspicion as to why, as his thoughts drifted back to that bird monster horror thing that attacked the concert and what he believed he saw at the end of that event. He watched as his old childhood friend held his sword up over his head before using it to draw a circle of light and bringing the sword down. The circle opened a portal and familiar golden armor came down and equipped onto the green-haired teen. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe it. The young man facing down the monster alone is in fact GARO. The two parents went slack-jawed at this sudden revelation, but their stupor was very brief as their son shouted as he pointed at the screen. I knew it. GARO took a low stance, sword arm back with the blade pointed forward, his free arm held up in a guard as the blade edge scraped against the bracer shield. Sabnok screeched in challenge, prompting the Golden Knight to charge at it. The beast charged as well, its head low in an attempt to bulldoze the smaller foe. GARO then, at the last minute, leapt up and slashed out one of the smaller eyes of the monster. Sabnok roared in pain before turning around and firing the quills on its chest like makeshift bullets. GARO charged again, swinging his sword around to deflect the incoming quills, and jumped up again. The titanic horror would not fall for that a second time and quickly lashed out with its tail. The Golden Knight brought his sword to defend before being thrown back. He tumbled a bit before righting himself and leapt at the beast again. His sword struck true, slicing a large piece of the monster's tail right off, eliciting another screech of pain. Sabnok was seeing red at this point and swung one of its huge club-like limbs at the small knight. GARO, seeing the giant weapon coming, dashed forward out of the way only to come within range of the beast's massive feet. Sabnok stomped down hard, again and again, trying to squash the pest that had hurt it, but the young knight evaded each strike. Trying a new tactic, the horror fired its quills again en masse with GARO deflecting them, but this was only a distraction as the beast leapt back a short distance. Sabnok then raised its Thagomizer arm up high and brought it down with everything it had, intending to smash the Golden Knight like a bug. GARO, in response, readied himself, the circuit lines of his armor now glowing neon green. The massive limb was stopped, almost comically, by GARO's sword. Said sword wielder sliding back from the force before halting after a few feet. Once he stopped, GARO pushed the weapon arm away before it came back down. This time, however, GARO grabbed it by wrapping both arms around the oversized Thagomizer. Heroes and civilians alike stared in confusion on what exactly the golden-clad youth was up to before eyes bugged out and jaws dropped to the pavement as GARO lifted the giant horror off its feet, swung it around and hurled it several yards away, right towards a construction zone. What? Exclaimed several news personnel, civilians and heroes watching. And they run when the sun comes up with their lives on the line. Closing parenthesis. Continued a number of students and faculty members of local Aldera Junior High School. Alive, for a while, no choice, gotta follow the laws of wild. Beep. Finished one Katsuki Bakugo and parents. Alive, with their lives on the line. GARO immediately jumped after it, landing on the same arm it grabbed it by, then running up the limb, slashing away at the limb. No choice. Yes. Split it wide open. Inko cheered her son on as she jumped up. Out here, only the strong survive. Mere feet away from the monster's shoulder, GARO leapt up before delivering one last powerful slash, completely severing the arm from the main body. Sabnok crashed into the site, flailing about at the loss of one its limbs. GARO, meanwhile, landed just outside of it. The Golden Knight's attention was drawn to the crowd of reporters watching, that were closer than they should be. Some heroes were trying to keep them back while a few approached him. "Need a hand?" one of them in a baseball-themed costume asked. "I'm fine, but get those people back, this fight's far from over," GARO replied. "Young Midoriya, that monster's getting back up," All Might called out. GARO turned back to Sabnok, doing just as the number 1 pro said, the spikes on the horror's remaining arm extended out and all twisted to point directly at him. "That can't be good," GARO remarked before looking at the other pro heroes. "Get those people back, now." "Right," they replied in unison as they ran to do as ordered. GARO dashed out into a more open space away from as much people as he could, making sure Sabnok was focused on him, and stood a good distance away from his foe. Inko stood up as the energy from the fight had gotten to her. "Finish that bastard off," she shouted with a feral grin. Rules of nature. The horror launched the spikes covering his remaining arm club-like missiles. "And they run when the sun comes up with their lives on the line." Closing parenthesis. GARO leapt up onto the nearest one before running up the projectiles one by one. His sword had been thrown to the side before returning as a spinning death disc, cutting any stray spike from hitting anyone or thing behind him, until he was within range. Alive. For a while. No choice. Gotta follow the laws of wild. The two-bladed cables on his back lashed out like snakes, digging into the monster's hide, just as GARO caught his sword before turning himself and his sword into a spinning saw. The two cables pulled the impromptu blade right through the horror's other arm, slicing it completely off. Alive, with their lives on the line. GARO landed with a gentle thud via, ironically enough, superhero landing just as Sabnok smashed into the ground after being thrown off balance with the loss of its other limb. No choice. The Golden Knight didn't linger long as he quickly turned around, sword at the ready, just as the disarmed horror came rushing in, mandibles wide open, further enraged at the loss of both thagomizers, as it picked up GARO in its jaws. Out here, only the strong survive. GARO then drove his sword right into the horror's massive eye, prompting said monster to throw the Golden Knight away, somersaulting right into the wall of the upper floors of a nearby high-rise. What's done is done, survive to see another day. Fortunately, GARO managed to land feet first and, without wasting a moment, began to run down the side of the building. The game of life, the hunter and the agile prey. Sabnok, completely lost in rage and pain at this point, began to throw whatever it could get its jaws on at the Golden Knight as he descended down. No GUARENTEE, which of them will succeed? Despite bobbing, weaving and sliding to avoid the improvised weapons as he continued downward, GARO maintained his focus on his target, his sword, still lodged in the now dead giant eye of the horror. Strong or weak? Once he was close enough, GARO leapt out and grasped his sword once again. Now in a panic, Sabnok lashed about to shake him off, but the Golden Knight held firm. "Your night ends here." At the last word, GARO bolted forward, dragging his sword up and then down the horror's head, neck, back and base of tail before leaping off and landing softly on the ground. Sabnok seemingly frozen in place. Izuku dismissed the armor before moving to sheath his sword. Just as the click of the hilt sounded, the titanic horror split in two, each half falling in opposite directions as it dispersed into nothing. He then reached back and brought his hood back over his head and walked towards where All Might was with the crowd. The gathered crowd remained silent and slack-jawed. The younger members would swear that had just witnessed a video game boss battle in real life, complete with quick-time events, some even saying that all was missing was some banging rock music. The only one not shocked was All Might, having witnessed Midoriya's prowess up close before. The symbol of peace smiled as he found himself thoroughly impressed with the young man's performance against the horror. He was mindful of the civilians, making sure we gave him a wide berth to keep them out of the monster's attack range, even going as far as to throw it away from the crowd. And he defended them from projectiles while moving in for the critical blow. He then looked around the streets they had fought in. Could use a little work on keeping collateral down, but given what he was fighting, I guess it's to be expected. All Might then cleared his throat, gaining the crowd's attention. You can clap now. The #1 pro's words quickly registered and the audience exploded in applause. Did you see that? Whoa, that's GARO. He's just a kid. What kind of quirk lets him do that? Oh my god, he's so god. Damn, cool. Izuku just tuned it out as he made his way through the crowd with All Might escorting him. An hour later found All Might driving back to his apartment after having dropped off Izuku at home. If this is what the Makai Order does every night, then it was no wonder he found young Midoriya so tuckered out when they first met. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. Now who could be calling him at this hour? A quick glance showed a familiar number. Hello, Uncle Might. Melissa, how are you? Hey, Toshi, Dave, it's been years. How've you two been? We've been okay. We caught that fight in Japan not too long ago, Dave replied. Yeah, are you okay? I mean, I know we didn't see you fight that monster, but... Calm down, Melissa, I'm fine. GARO had that completely under control. Do you know GARO? He doesn't look that much older than me. Actually, you two are around the same age. Wait, seriously. Indeed. With everything that's going on in the world, Toshi, that has to be the most normal thing I've heard in weeks. With everything going on, I'd say anything is possible at this point, from flying pigs to Melissa becoming a great pro hero. I doubt that, I mean I am quirkless after all. She giggled. A knowing smirk grew on All Might's lips. Funny you should mention that. To be continue. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.